Okay, we're going to start now the shir on Hilchos Shabbos. We're going to continue from Siman Mem Tes, now the Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Siman Mem Tes, and we're holding now in Sif Yud. Last week we mentioned the halachas regarding making a meal on Erev Shabbos on Friday. So we spoke that the Rebbe mentioned that if you have a meal, if you have a very, very big meal, like this type of meal they would make by a chasna or something like that on Friday, so you're not allowed to do that even Friday in the morning, because we're going to have a very big meal on Friday, you won't be able to eat the Shabbos meal properly. But however, if you have a chasna or something which has to be done at that day, as we learned last week, what types of sudas, Alter Rebbe writes as a sudas mitzvah that has to be done that day, so then you're allowed to do it even on Friday, but it's best to do it before the beginning of the 10th hour in the day, which is 3 hours before Shkia, before sunset. 3 hours again, and not 60 minutes by the clock, but they go the hours based on the length of the day. You split the day into 12 parts, and each part is an hour. So these, today over here in Siman would be about I think it's 75 minutes. Each hour would be by day about 75 minutes. Anyway, that's regarding a Suda party, which is a real heavy party. The Alter Rebbe says not to have even Friday morning unless it's Suda's mitzvah. What about the Suda K'tan, a regular meal like a breakfast, lunch, and supper? The Alter Rebbe says that there you're allowed to have it up until 3 hours before Shkia. But Alter Rebbe still writes that even afterwards, after 3 hours, you're allowed to have, it's no Isser. There's no clear Isser in having a meal, even a regular meal that you have on a regular day. Nevertheless, Alter Rebbe writes that it's a mitzvah to refrain from having such a meal before, from 3 hours before sunset and on until Shabbos. And I mentioned last week that the Kseisa Shulchan writes that what will be considered, what would fall under the category of what mitzvah to refrain from. So he writes, it's obviously washing. Also, even if you don't wash, but if you eat mezainis, eat cake or cookies more than the size of a kibbeh, more than the size of an egg, and if you drink a mashka, hamashaka, intoxicating liquid, in the size of a kibbeh, the size of an egg, mezainis also the size of an egg, but anything else like fruit or anything else that's not a mezainis, and not a mashka, mashaka, not a drink that's intoxicating. So technically there is no limitation on having that any time on Friday, even up until Shkia. Nevertheless, I mentioned last week that it's still best, as Svarim bring down, that a person should refrain from even filling up his stomach, even with things that are not mezainis, that are not considered the kviya soda, because there's an Indian just to make sure to have the meal, the Friday meal, with an appetite, so even if he's not supposed to be starving, as we'll see later on, a person is not supposed to go into Shabbos fasting. He should obviously, if he needs to eat, he should eat. But nevertheless, he should at least have in mind to leave some room in the system that he should be able to enjoy the Shabbos meal properly by night. Now the Alter Rebbe says another halach. In Sif Yud, the Alter Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe says that once it becomes dark, or once a person was mekabel on himself Shabbos, even something could be mekabel Shabbos earlier on Friday. So there, it's a mitzvah not to eat anything until a person eats his meal. In other words, let's say a person comes home from shul Friday night and is going to make kiddush, but he's not going to eat his meal until an hour later. It's very common that you have mashal on winter Friday during the winter. And let's say some people want to make kiddush before 6, and they don't eat between 6 and 7, so they're going to make kiddush and have mezainis or what have you, because they have to have kiddush mokum, so they can have to have some mezainis together with the kiddush. But they're not planning to eat their meal until later, until at least an hour later or so. So Alter Rebbe writes, as we'll soon see, there's a number of variations, or a number of pratim. Alter Rebbe writes, it's a mitzvah to refrain from eating once it's already Shabbos comes in, or if it's before dark, but this person was mekabel on himself Shabbos and he's planning to eat his Shabbos meal also before dark, It's a mitzvah to eat anything, not only those things like we said, like washing or having mezainas the size of an egg, whatever it might be, but it's a mitzvah to refrain from eating anything, even things that are not considered the kviyas suda. Even after he makes kiddush, I mean, why? Even he has to make kiddush in order to be able to eat anything. But even after he makes kiddush, he shouldn't eat anything. Why? The Alter Rebbe says that the main part of the meal, the ikar suda Shabbos, is the bread, which he makes hamoitzi on. Which without the bread, he's not yotzeh the obligation of having on Shabbos the obligation to have 3 meals. So the chiyuv of the suda is dafka on bread. We'll speak about it a little bit later. So therefore, even if he's going to wash, he's going to make kiddush now, and he's going to eat mezainis in order to have kiddush and mokim suda, whatever it will be. He'll have another cup of wine, whatever, as Alter Rebbe explains later on, Siman and Gimel, whatever fits into the category of mokim suda. Nevertheless, he won't have a problem of having his kiddush will be okay because he had mokim suda, but there will be a problem that he'll lose if he's going to eat anything before he eats the bread. He's not going to eat the bread, which is the main ingredient of the Suda Shabbos, with a proper appetite. So therefore, again, there's no Isser, but the Alter Rebbe writes it's a mitzvah to refrain from eating anything, even after you make Kiddush, until you're going to eat the bread. However, the Alter Rebbe adds in parentheses, you don't have to be moiche, you don't have to stop those that are lenient, because min hadin, from the letter of the law, there is no Isser, there's no chiyuv gomer. There's no full-fledged obligation to eat the Friday meal with the appetite. So if a person's going to make kiddush, let's say, like people commonly do, I mean, some people do this, they make kiddush, let's say Friday night, especially Shabbos by day. Shabbos by day is a bit different anyway, but at any rate, Shabbos by day, befrat, people make kiddush and they have mezainis, and then later they're going to have their meal. So, in such a case, Alter Rebbe says that there is a mokim lihimona to refrain from eating anything before the meal on Friday night. But nevertheless, you don't have to be meichen before eating the bread. You don't have to be meichen those that are meichen. Now, just a few pratim over here. There's a few things to discuss. Alter Rebbe has a kuntra sachron over here, and Alter Rebbe seems to make a differentiation between a person that is making kiddush and he's planning on having his meal a little bit later on, let's say an hour or so later. So then it seems a little bit from the Alter Rebbe that in such a type of a case there is room that in such a type of a case one could say that he could, let's say, make kiddush and eat something now, and then before the meal, and then he won't doubt. So since he's anyway pushing off his meal for a little bit later. So he'll have his appetite. So he'll have his proper appetite for the meal. They say it's an andre verter that if a person is, let's say like I told you, that let's say in the winter Friday, so people make kiddush. If a person will make kiddush and will eat chapalapa, meaning mezainis, will have some mezainis, and then a little bit while later he's going to wash. So then in such a type of a case, usually by him eating his mezainis, he will have already lost his appetite. So when the time is, and since he's washing not too far off from then, so then he'll already lose out on the inyan of eating the bread and the challah, which is the main Suda Shabbos, the proper appetite. However, if a person is, let's say, he's going to have a big hefsek, it will be, like people, if those are, let's say, frat, like in winter, you have a whole hour or whatever it is, or even more, between the kiddush and your mezainis that you're having and the meal, it seems that Alter Rebbe in the Kuntas Achron leaves room to say that in such a case it's not a problem, as long as you don't fill yourself up. If you make kiddush and you have a little bit of cake and you're not really filling yourself up, you're just eating a little bit, whatever, and kiddush mokim suda, so the time the meal comes around, you'll have a full-fledged appetite for the meal. So if you're going to eat a little bit, and you're going to have a time span, a big time span before the meal, so you'll have then a proper appetite. Vices, according to the one of the Ifanim and Kuntas Achron, it won't be a problem to do. Another oifen in the Kuntas Achron that Alter Rebbe brings down is that if a person eats, meaning is certain things that Rebbe is mechalik between certain things that are megared as alev, that open up, make the person's appetite more. The Alter Rebbe discusses different shittas what that is. But the Alter Rebbe says that if a person is eating sweet things like cake, I guess, or things like that are sweet, or things that have a bit of a sharpness to it, that open up a person's appetite, So then it could be that such a thing, since that it's making the person's appetite more, in such a case it would be mutter. In such a case, in other words, one if not Rebbe's mechalik, how long before your meal you're eating. If you're eating right before the meal, so then it would be asur because if you're eating the mezenos right before the meal, it would be asur because you're taking away your appetite. However, if you're gonna eat a little later on, so the time the meal comes around, you already have back your appetite because you didn't fill yourself up before, it would be fine. Another way from that Rebbe seems to be mechalik is he makes a difference. Does not this difference, but he makes another difference between things like regular mezonos, things that a person eats that satisfy him, but then things that are sweet or things that have a bit of a sharpness to it, whatever it is, things that make a person's appetite even more, that those things a person would be able to eat before the meal. And it's not clear. I mean, that it's a kunta sach that Rebbe gives two ifanim over here. But b'chol ofen, it seems that the Rebbe gives room. I don't know whether one ofen outdoes the one ofen contradicts the other ofen, it's either this way or the other way. But I'll upon him. But that's what the Rebbe writes. So l'chayda, besides the fact that the Rebbe writes, they don't have to be meichen, those that are makel, those that are not careful for this. But l'chayda on a winter Friday, where people make kiddush and then they have mezonos, whatever it is, and then they have their meal an hour or so later, according to the Kuntras Achrin, it would come out that it should be okay. As long as, obviously, I mean, the Rebbe doesn't specify this, but you have to add, as long as you're not going to fill yourself up right after kiddush to the extent that when the meal comes around, you just, you lost your appetite. Or alternatively, if you're going to eat sweet things, the Rebbe doesn't seem that the Rebbe makes a difference between when. I mean, it seems that even if it's right before the meal, if you're eating it right before the meal, it's a difference whether it's sweet or not sweet. So l'chayr, if you're going to be eating sweet things, cake or stuff like that, also maybe a shmokim lahakal, even if you're going to have the meal not so far down the road.
Cake is very filling.
But anyway, but things like that, pasta, babakis, and things like that they're going to be mo'ira, taiva samaychel, it seems from the Alter Rebbe that even if you're eating it right before the meal, you're shmokim lahakal. So even if you're going, at any rate. But then there's another issue with B'negei Bracha, which we'll see about a little bit later. If you're eating cake before you're going to wash Hametzi. That's one nekuda that Alter Rebbe speaks about in the Kunter Sakra. There's another nekuda that people point out, which is that Alter Rebbe writes here very clearly that the main chiyuv, the main ikar suda of Shabbos is the bread, the chalas. Even if you're going to eat cake, the problem is you're going to eat other things, other ma'cholim that you might eat that are not the main ingredient of Suda Shabbos, and not Ikar Suda Shabbos. So the Alter Rebbe holds that you shouldn't eat them before because it will take away from eating the bread, the challah, with an appetite. Now over here there's a whole discussion. I mean, obviously there's probably different people have different takes on it. I don't think there's anything clear cut over here. But in this thing that Alter Rebbe writes unequivocally that the main suda of Shabbos is the chalas and not other types of mezenos, l'chayra, it doesn't seem to be necessarily the maskan of the Alter Rebbe, because there's a famous thing that the Alter Rebbe has, is that in Siman, not that the Alter Rebbe himself doesn't write it, but in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Chelik Aleph, you have the famous Hagor from the Maril, you have the famous thing that the Alter Rebbe's brother wrote, that towards the end of the Alter Rebbe's in Siman Kuf Beiches, that he says Shemaiti Mimenu B'Seif Yomov, that he heard from the Alter Rebbe at towards the end of the Alter Rebbe's life, that the Alter Rebbe holds that you yoytze, that it's mashma, you yoytze Suda Shabbos even if you're just eating mezenos. The whole discussion there in Negeya, if you bench, and if a person forgets to say in benching, he has to go back. Why does he have to go back? Because there's a chiyuv for him to wash and eat bread, at least the first two meals, Friday night meal and the Shabbos morning meal, the chiyuv for him to eat bread. So if a person is eating, if a person is going to eat, if a person is eating mezonos, so whatever it is, from the pashta halachas mashma is not yosi, dafka has to wash in order to say that say. The Alter Rebbe, the Maril writes Shemait that in the end of the Alter Rebbe's life, the Alter Rebbe said that since a person anyway mentions Shabbos and Al HaMichi as well, so this has cut of Shabbos and Al HaMichi, so a person could be yosi Suda Shabbos even if he eats mezonos. And even if he's eating mezonos, like this Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch, that those mezonos that you don't wash on, but you would have to eat enough of the shir that you would usually have to wash on. But in the Maril, Hagos Maril, he writes that even if you're eating the mezonos, you're not eating the shir kviyus suda, you're eating just enough, a kazayis, whatever it is, the kabei, whatever the shir of Suda Shabbos is to make Alamichya, you yotze the Suda Shabbos because you mentioned Shabbos. You're going to say in Alamichya, also say the Sevach, the same of Yom HaShabbos. Now, according to this, there's no clear-cut understanding of what this means and what this leads us to. Does that mean that Alter Rebbe holds that B'chlal it's not an Indian to wash on Shabbos, a person who just eat Mezonos and say Alamichya and is Yotze? Or is the Alter Rebbe writing this? Is this just, for this as some type of, B'di'eva type of situation that if a person can't wash, it's at least good enough? It's not, there's much written about it and spoken about it. But at any rate, the point is, there's a number of issues that I want to bring up over here. First of all, regarding the halacha we learned over here. The halacha we learned over here is that even if a person eats cake or mezonos or things like that, if he's not going to eat challah, the Alter Rebbe writes he's not yotze ikar sudas Shabbos. And that's why even eating mezonos could be a problem because it takes away from the appetite of eating the sudas Shabbos. Now, if you hold that eating mezonos itself is good enough, so l'chayda, what's the problem that you're taking away from the appetite to eat challah? You're eating mezonos right now, right here and now. You're being yotze to the Suda Shabbos. So what's the problem that will take away from the challah later? Right here now, being yotze to the Shabbos. So if you're going to go based on what Alter Rebbe held b'seif Yamov, yesh mokim loimer, there is room to say that ain't no chanami, that if a person is eating mezonos right after Kiddush, if you tackle the be yotze Suda Shabbos with just mezonos, without washing, because you're going to mention Shabbos and Al HaMichya, so then this whole din doesn't apply. If a person going to be eating mezonos, somebody could be yotze Kiddush mokim should also with wine, or maybe by wine you also, because you mentioned Al Hagef and also you mentioned Shabbos. I don't know, but at any rate, definitely if you're eating mezonos, so l'chayda you're yotze Shabbos meal right here now with the mezonos. So what are we worried about later? Not to eat the lechem l'tiyam. So some people point out that if you're going to go with that guy, so talk over here, it wouldn't be a problem. This whole halacha wouldn't apply. You're making kiddush eating mezonos, fine. You can eat whatever you want, as much as you want. You won't eat the challah with an appetite. Fine, but you're already yotze to the Shabbos. That's just the negaya here right now. However, the problem is that it's not so clear whether one should rely on this l'chatchila, this Alter Rebbe, that could be yotze to the Shabbos with mezonos. And the reason for it is because there's a number of issues, number of things that Alter Rebbe points out in different places regarding the importance of dafka eating bread for Shabbos. One thing that Alter Rebbe writes is that Ngeya Demon, we learn out Suda Shabbos from Demon. They had on Demon, on Friday they had a double portion, so from there we learn out Suda Shabbos. When it came to Demon, it says, we learn out, it says 3 times, the Vachila by Demon, so from there is the source for having 3 meals on Shabbos. There it says lechem. It says clearly the word lechem. That's one reason that it's brought down that you have to have dafka bread or challah, because by the mon it says the mon was called lechem, was bread, so you dafka have to have bread. Mezonos is not good enough. Unless you really want to argue and say that bread is also, mezonos could also be called lechem, but that's, I don't think that will go so smoothly. Another word is, the Alter Rebbe says, another reason why dafka have to have lechem is because the main thing, shalav yichya adam, what's the main staple of man's bread that he lives on is lechem, is bread. So meila lechem has a chashivas that's why they were kriveya dafka lechem to be for the suda, that you should have the suda Shabbos dafka with bread. Another word that Alter Rebbe said that since on Shabbos you have to have oinig Shabbos. Alter Rebbe said that since the lechem is the main part of the meal, so the main oinig, you don't have oineg and simcha without eating challah. The main oineg and simcha is with eating challah, because the whole suda is called al shem alechem. The whole suda is focused and is based, it comes from the lechem, is based on the bread. That's the main oineg of the suda. So therefore, you have to eat challah, because challah gives a person a certain enjoyment, and that enjoyment is the main food staple. The person's not yet to fully oinig Shabbos without the lechem, without the challah. Based on this, it seems to imply that unless, again, you're going to try to be doichik, from here, according to these reasons, would come out that the dafka person needs to have challah, not mezonos. Then there's another reason that you have to you have to mention Shabbos and benching. So there, and alagabi, that reason, that's where it's brought down, that Alter Rebbe, b'seif Yomov, then, towards the end of his life, he held that eating mezonos is good enough, because even by mezonos you mention Shabbos and Al HaMichya. But it still doesn't explain how mezonos takes the place of lechem, which we learn out by Suda Shabbos from the Mon, and Shalav Yichyadim, that's the main staple of mankind, and also the thing of Oineg and Simcha, which is Dafka by Lechem, which Dikar Asuda. These things don't apply to so much to Mezainis. So therefore, it's not clear. There are people. It's what you have to ask your local Rav. But based on that, people write that it's not clear whether this is a lechatchila, to eat mezainis to the Shabbos. There's other things that dafka by lechem that don't apply to mezainis that should seem to imply they should have to have dafka lechem, dafka challah. Like people see, but most Jewish houses, the challah is a very important, gives a chashivas to the whole Shabbos. A certain, Shabbos would be missing if you wouldn't have challah. So l'chayda, according to this, it would, the mezainis can't substitute that really. So l'chayda should come out. So l'chayda would come out that one could say that, even though you could maybe, person needs to l'chayda, you could rely on that out to Rebbe. But l'chayr it's still glatter, definitely. It's much more smoother to wash as well. Befrat the sikh of the Rebbe and Chelach Chafal from Mishalach and the Sudas of Shabbos, in case of the Shlishis we don't wash, whatever it is. And the way the Rebbe learns there in the Ha'aret about the Rebbe Rashab used to make Kiddush Shabbos in the morning, eat mezainis, and then daven mincha and wash. And so the Rebbe learns that the washing, when he washed after mincha, that was for the place of the first meal. The mezainis that he ate in the morning was in the place of shalosh shudas. A whole thing. So the way the Rebbe learns there, it seems also in the Piskei Dinim of the Samach Tzedek, also which seems to imply very strongly that you can't be used a suda of Shabbos without lachem. Shalosh shudas is different. Shalosh shudas for meiko, whatever it is. But at least the Shabbos in the morning and Shabbos at night and Shabbos in the morning, you need to have dafka challah to be able to suda Shabbos. So again, there's yeshmokim lakan, you could say ahera derahin, but negeya our halacha, even if you're going to want to say that you could be yotze suda Shabbos, but mezainis is definitely since Peil Mamish, if a person is going to wash and he is going to have challah, definitely, and you should still it's still a big room to say that you should, that the mezainis wouldn't take the place of challah, and you shouldn't eat mezainis so not to lose. You shouldn't make kiddush in the mezainis so not to lose the appetite for the challah. I heard that people always mention what the Rebbe did by Farbrengens. The Rebbe used to make kiddush and eat what he made kiddush the first time, make kiddush second time, whatever. I'm not getting into whatever people say. But what I've heard once from Label, I don't know when this was, it seems he was talking about the last years, I can't guarantee it, but what I heard once from him is that the Rebbe, he would make kiddush by the Farbrengen, he would eat mezainis, and then in the later years, the Farbrengens didn't end always so late. So the Rebbe would go to his room, and that was already after mincha, usually. After mincha. So the Rebbe would inquire if there was still a few minutes to shkia. If there was still a few minutes to shkia, the Rebbe would wash. So according to this, again, I can't guarantee it, but according to this, l'chayre would come out that mitzad echad, the Rebbe, so to say, had mezainis, but he would try it also, he was able to wash as well, to be able to din of washing as well. But at any rate, so that's b'nigeya that part. Now, if a person is going to eat mezainis, if you're going to say that you could be yotze eating, eating the Suda Shabbos with mezainis, just a number of things that would come up. One thing would be whether you need to have lachem mishnah for the mezainis, eating mezainis, and that's the Suda Shabbos. So part of the chiyuv of Suda Shabbos is to have lachem mishnah. So if you're not eating bread, so everybody knows lachem mishnah, you have two chalas. But if instead of the chalas you're eating mezainis, so maybe you have to have two cookies, whatever it is, two complete cookies. So whatever it might be. So that's one issue that would be. It would be another question. Would be b'negei if a person forgets ritzei. So if a person, so the whole reason why he has to go over, because he has to say. He has to mention Shabbos and mention. What if he ate cake and he said Al HaMichya and he mentioned Shabbos there? So l'chayre that takes. If you say that's enough. So if he forgets to say, the halacha is they have to go back and bench. So there's a number of the question would be if there would be ma'akev and Al HaMichya if he forgot Shabbos in order to say to go back if he's being yoitz on that. But at any rate, whatever, you can make a difference whether he's having a mind to be able to do the Shabbos, not having a mind. If he ate challah and that was his suit, and if he forgot to say he would have to bench. If he ate together with that, before that, after that, he ate mezainis and he had a mind to be able to the Shabbos, maybe then, yeshmokim leimer, that if he forgot to say he wouldn't have to go back. as long as he had in mind with his Mezainis to be to the Shabbos, and he mentioned it in Alamich. Whatever it might be, again, these are just svaras that people bring, and everybody should ask their local Rav. But one thing which comes right away, if you've been going to the Shabbos, Mezainis, what do you do with Lechem Mishnah? So there's certain people that are, whatever. So the Mashal Shabbos in the morning, a lot of people that make Kiddush need Mezainis. People are not Medaik to have Lechem Mishnah. But there, again, the people write, there's a svara that they're not having in mind to be yoyt to the main Suda Shabbos with the Mezainis. They're just eating the Mezainis to have Kiddush from Makom. So that they'll wash later and they'll have a meal later with Lechem Mishnah. But at any rate, that's just some of the issues that would come up with this whole discussion of being yoyt to Mezainis for the Shabbos meal. I just want to say one more halacha, which is an important halacha, which is also a whole arichas in the Kundasach, which I'm not going to get into. The Rebbe says that a person could make Kiddush. A person could make Kiddush and eat Mezainis, and before the meal, and the Rebbe says that he should refrain from doing that, because he should eat the bread with the yovin, he should eat the bread with an appetite, but nevertheless, the Rebbe writes, it's not you don't have to be moiche, you don't have to stop them, because it's not a isur, there's no chiyuv gomer, there's no full-fledged obligation to eat the Suda Shabbos with an appetite. The Rebbe adds here an important point. The Rebbe said that even if you go, those people that are makel, those people that eat whatever it is, mezainis or other types of things before the meal, he's only allowed to do this if if this type of food that he's eating, he only wants to eat now, not in the middle of the meal. But if he was planning on eating it in the middle of the meal anyway, the reason why he's eating it before the meal is because he wants to add meya brachas like this. If he's going to make it before the meal, eat it before the meal, so then he'll be able to have to make a bracha achrein also. So he'll have an extra bracha that he'll, for the bracha achrein. So on Shabbos, you're always looking to add brachas for the 100 brachas, so he wants to eat it before the meal to add the bracha achrein. So then the Rebbe says it's an isur gomer min hadin. The Rebbe says that's totally yasir, because one is not allowed to cause a bracha that's not needed. So if he was anyway planning on eating this in the middle of the meal, if he would have eaten it in the middle of the meal, it would have been included in benching. Now he's eating a dafka before the meal to make a bracha achrona, so he's doing it in order to make extra bracha. The Rebbe says it's asur. Besides, other problem is that he's making hamoitzi is the first bracha. So whatever he's eating, if he's eating mezainis, whatever that he wanted to eat during the meal, so he's doing the mezainis before the hamoitzi. It's also a nisa. However, the Rebbe is if a person doesn't want to eat it during the meal. The leitza was cake, whatever it is, he wasn't planning on having part of the meal. He's eating it before the meal because he wants to eat it now, so then there's no problem about being goyim a bracha sheina tzricha, because he wasn't planning on eating it during the meal anyway. And also there's no problem by making mezainis before hamoitzi, because there's no chiyuv if he wants to eat this now, he doesn't want to wash now, there's no chiyuv for him to wash, make hamoitzi first. There's no, as long as right now he's not up to washing, he could eat whatever he wants, not being worried about the fact that he's doing it before the bracha of hamoitzi. However, in the Kuntras Achron, the Rebbe does give some leeway for this whole thing, that some cases, according to some opinions, if a person is doing it in order to be mashal meya brachas, maybe it is mutter, but whatever, I don't think the Rebbe does in the different places mashal different things, but at least over here, inside the Pnim, the Rebbe seems to be clear. The Rebbe writes clearly, even though it's in parentheses, but he writes that it's isur gomer min hadin if a person is going to eat something before the meal only in order to be, which he was anyway planning of eating in the middle of the meal, only in order to get the extra bracha. So there's two problems here. One is that he's causing a bracha that's not necessary, and the second problem is that he's making that bracha before the bracha of hamoitzi, the bracha mezainis before hamoitzi. Okay, we'll stop here.